I didn't expect anything meaningful to come out of that day. It was just another interview. Another glass building with too much reflection and not enough personality. Another receptionist asking me to sign in. Another waiting area filled with people pretending not to size each other up. I got there early. I always do. Something about being late to something that could change your life feels like a risk I'm not willing to take. That's how I ended up standing in line, holding a folder I didn't need, rehearsing answers I'd probably forget the second I sat down. That's also how I met Carl. He was two people ahead of me at first. I only really noticed him because he kept checking his phone, then locking it again immediately, like he didn't actually want to read whatever was on it. Nervous habit. I recognized it because I was doing the same thing. At some point, the line shifted, people moved around, and suddenly he was right in front of me. He turned slightly, just enough to glance back, probably checking how long the line had gotten. Our eyes met for half a second. "Long morning already," he said. His voice was calm, not overly friendly, not awkward, just normal, which was surprisingly rare in that kind of setting. I let out a quiet breath. "Yeah, and it hasn't even started yet." He smiled. Not big, just enough to make it feel genuine. I was thinking the same thing. We stood there for a second longer than strangers usually do after a small exchange. Not uncomfortable, just open. "I'm Carl," he added, shifting his folder to his other hand so he could extend one. "Jordan," I said, shaking it. His grip was warm, steady, not trying too hard. "First interview today?" he asked. "Yeah. You?" "Second," he said. "First one didn't go great." There was something refreshing about how easily he admitted that. "Honest," I said. "Figured there's no point pretending," he replied. "We're literally standing in the same line." I laughed quietly. That broke the tension more than anything else. The line moved again, and this time we stayed side by side instead of one behind the other. "What about you?" he asked. "You feeling confident?" I hesitated. Prepared. Not sure about confident. "Same difference," he said. "It's really not," I replied. He glanced at me again, a little more directly this time. "Okay, fair. But you don't look like someone who's about to mess it up." That caught me off guard. "Is that your professional assessment?" I asked. "Yeah," he said, completely straight-faced. "Years of experience standing in lines." I shook my head, smiling despite myself. For a moment, I forgot where we were. Forgot about the interview, the pressure, the quiet competition in the room. It just felt like talking. Easy, natural talking. Then his name was called. "Carl." We both turned. "That's me," he said, exhaling once under his breath. He looked back at me, just for a second. "Guess we'll see if I do better this time." "You will," I said, before I could overthink it. He held my gaze a fraction longer than necessary. "Yeah. Yeah." He nodded slowly. "All right. I'm choosing to believe you." And then he followed the recruiter down the hallway, disappearing around the corner like that was it. I expected that to be it. People come and go in places like that all the time. You have 5-minute conversations, maybe share a laugh, then never see each other again. It's just how it works. But when I sat down for my own interview 20 minutes later, I caught myself thinking about him. Not in a dramatic way, just small things. The way he didn't try too hard to impress. The way he spoke like he actually meant what he said. The way he looked at me when I told him he'd do better. It stuck. My interview went fine. Not amazing, not terrible. One of those where you walk out replaying every answer, convincing yourself you should have said something slightly different. When I stepped back into the waiting area, it was mostly empty. Except for him. Carl was sitting in one of the chairs, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor like he was deep in thought. I hesitated for a second, then walked over. "Hey." He looked up immediately, like he'd been pulled out of something. "Oh hey," he said. "You done?" "Yeah." "You." "Just finished." There was a pause. "Well?" I asked. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling. "Better than the first one." "Told you." He smiled at that. "You did." I sat down in the chair next to him without really thinking about it. "You waiting for something?" I asked. "Yeah. They said HR might come talk to me again." "Second round already?" "Apparently." "Okay, now I'm impressed," I said. He shrugged, but I could tell he was pleased. "We'll see." Another pause settled between us. Not awkward, just unfinished. "Are you heading out?" he asked. "Yeah, I think so." He nodded slowly, like he was considering something. Then, after a second, "Hey, do you maybe want to grab coffee or something? If you're not in a rush." It wasn't smooth. It wasn't overly confident. It sounded real, and that made it harder to say no. I checked the time. even though I already knew I had nowhere urgent to be. Yeah, I said. I can do coffee. His expression shifted subtle, but noticeable, like he hadn't been entirely sure I'd agree. Cool, he said. There's a place across the street, I think. Lead the way. He stood up, grabbing his folder, and for a second we just looked at each other again. Strangers an hour ago. Now walking out together like this was something we'd planned. And I didn't know it yet, but that line, that random morning, that simple long morning already, that was the start of something I wouldn't be able to walk away from easily. The coffee place was small, crowded in that late morning way where every table is taken but no one seems in a rush to leave. Carl held the door open for me, then stepped in right behind me like we'd already done this before. Good sign, he said quietly, glancing around. Busy usually means it's decent. Or just well marketed, I replied. He smirked. You're skeptical. I'm realistic. We ordered quickly, nothing complicated, and ended up standing off to the side while waiting for our drinks. Close enough to keep talking, not so close that it felt forced. So, he said, shifting his weight slightly. What made you apply there? I shrugged. It felt like the next step. Better pay. More structure. Less drifting. He nodded like he understood exactly what I meant. Yeah, that drifting part gets old. What about you? Same, he said. I've been doing contract stuff for a while. It's fine, but, he trailed off, then added, I think I want something that actually feels stable. There was something in the way he said it. Not just about work. Yeah, I said quietly. I get that. Our drinks were called, and he grabbed both cups before I could reach for mine. Thanks, I said. Don't mention it, he replied, handing it over. We found a small table by the window, barely enough space for 2 people, but somehow it worked. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Not because we didn't have anything to say, but because it felt like we were both realizing the same thing at the same time. This wasn't just a random conversation anymore. So, he said, wrapping his hands around his cup, be honest. How bad do you think you did? I let out a quiet laugh. You first. He shook his head. No chance. Then I plead the fifth. He leaned back slightly, studying me. You don't seem like someone who completely bombs interviews. And you don't seem like someone who needs a second round to prove himself. I shot back. Fair, he admitted. We both smiled. It was easy. Too easy. That's what caught me off guard. I'm not usually like that with people I just met. I take time. I observe. I keep things surface level until I know where someone stands. With Carl, that part just didn't happen. So what do you do when you're not trying to impress interviewers? He asked. Depends, I said. Gym sometimes. Reading. I've been trying to get back into running, but I hate it every time I start. He laughed. Yeah, running is one of those things people pretend to enjoy. What about you? Music, he said. Not professionally or anything. Just something I've always stuck with. What kind? Mostly guitar, he said. Helps me clear my head. I nodded slowly. That's a good one to have. What about you? He asked. Anything like that? I thought about it for a second. Honestly, I think I'm still figuring that out. He didn't respond right away. Just looked at me for a moment, like he was actually considering that answer. That's fair, he said finally. Most people pretend they already know. Yeah, I said. I'm trying not to do that anymore. Another pause. Not empty, just steady. Outside, people passed by the window, moving quickly, focused on their own lives. Inside, everything felt slower. Can I ask you something? He said. Sure. Do you usually say yes when someone you met in a line asks you for coffee? I smiled slightly. No. Then why did you? I held his gaze for a second longer than necessary. You didn't feel like a stranger, I said. That landed. I saw it in the way his expression shifted, subtle, but real. Yeah, he said quietly. I was thinking the same thing. Neither of us looked away immediately, and that's when I noticed it. Not something obvious. Not something you could point to and label right away. Just something there. The kind of feeling you don't question in the moment, but remember later. We kept talking after that. About small things. Stupid things. The kind of conversation that stretches without you noticing time passing. At some point, he checked his phone and frowned slightly. I might have to head back, he said. They said they'd call me in if HR's ready. Right, I said. Of course. There was that shift again. The reminder that this had started as something temporary. We both stood up at the same time. Hey, he said, a little more hesitant now. Can I get your number? There it was. Simple. Direct. No weird build-up. Yeah, I said, pulling out my phone. We exchanged numbers quickly, both of us pretending it wasn't a bigger deal than it was. I'll text you, he said. Okay. Another pause. Then he added, even if I don't get the job. I smiled. Good. Because I might not get it either. Then we'll both have a reason to complain, he said. Exactly. He hesitated for a second, like he wanted to say something else. Then he didn't. I'll see you, Jordan. See you, Carl. And just like that, we walked in opposite directions. But this time, it didn't feel like the end of something small. It felt like the beginning of something neither of us fully understood yet. He texted me before I even got home. Carl, hey, made it back in time. Still waiting, but figured I shouldn't wait to text you. I stared at the message longer than I needed to. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because of how quickly it shifted something in me. Like the day wasn't over just because we'd walked in different directions. Me, good call. Would have been rude to disappear after coffee. Carl, exactly. I have a reputation to maintain. I smiled without thinking. Me, of being honest about bad interviews? Carl, hey, that's part of my charm. I dropped onto my couch, still holding my phone, the quiet of my apartment settling around me. Me, so are you still confident you did better? Carl, yeah, actually. I think I did. Me, told you. Carl, you did. I'm starting to think you might be right about things. There was a pause after that. Not in the conversation, but in how it felt. Like we both noticed it. Me, careful. That's a dangerous habit to start. Carl, too late. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. This wasn't supposed to matter. It was just a guy I met in line. A random conversation that extended into coffee. But it didn't feel random anymore. Carl, what are you doing now? I glanced around my apartment. Quiet. Still. Me, nothing exciting. Just got home. Carl, same. Well, sitting in a hallway pretending not to be stressed. Me, how's that going? Carl, terribly. I laughed under my breath. Me, you'll be fine. Carl, there it is again. Me, what? Carl, you saying things like that like you actually believe them. I paused for a second. Me, I do. The typing bubble appeared almost immediately, then disappeared, then came back. Carl, thanks. Something about that felt more real than anything else we'd said. The rest of the afternoon passed with small messages like that. Nothing intense. Just checking in, commenting on how long he'd been waiting, me telling him to stop overthinking things. At some point, the messages stopped. I didn't think much of it at first. He was probably in the interview, or talking to HR. But when an hour passed, then two. I noticed. I told myself not to. Still, I checked my phone more than I needed to. Then finally, Carl, sorry. That took forever. I exhaled, not realizing I'd been holding that tension. Me, all good. How'd it go? There was a longer pause this time. Then, Carl, I think. I got it. I sat up a little straighter. Me, seriously? Carl, they didn't say officially, but yeah, it felt like that. Me, that's huge. Carl, yeah? Another pause. Carl, you were right. I shook my head, smiling. Me, don't make it a habit. Carl, too late, remember? I could almost hear his voice saying it. Me, so what now? Celebrating? Carl, I was thinking about it. There was a shift there. Subtle, but clear. Carl, you busy tonight? I already knew my answer before I read it. Me, no. Carl, good. Another pause. Then, Carl, come out with me. Not want to hang out. Not maybe we could meet. Just come out with me. Simple. Certain. I stared at the message for a second. Then, me, where? Carl, there's a place not far from here. Nothing crazy. Just drinks. Me, you sure you want to celebrate with someone you met this morning? Carl, yeah? No hesitation. Carl, I am. That did it. Me, all right. Carl, good. A second later. Carl, send me your location. I'll meet you halfway. That night felt different from the start. Not in a dramatic way. Nothing had changed, technically, but everything felt more intentional. When I saw him again, standing outside the bar, hands in his pockets, scanning the street, it didn't feel like meeting a stranger for the second time. It felt like picking something back up. Hey, he said when he spotted me. Hey. We stood there for a second, both smiling slightly like neither of us wanted to admit we'd been looking forward to this. You actually came, he added. You invited me. I replied. Still, he said. You could have said no. I could have. But you didn't. No, I said. I didn't. He held my gaze for a second longer than usual, then nodded toward the door. Come on. Inside, it was loud enough to feel alive, but not overwhelming. Low lighting, music in the background, people talking over drinks. We found a spot at the bar. What are you having, he asked. Whatever you're having, I said. Bold move. I trust your judgment. He glanced at me sideways. That might be a mistake. Guess we'll find out. He ordered for both of us, then leaned back against the counter slightly, turning toward me. So, I said, this is your victory night. Apparently. You don't sound convinced. I think it just hasn't sunk in yet, he admitted. That's fair. He looked at me again, more focused now. I'm glad you came, he said. It wasn't casual. Yeah. I asked. Yeah. I nodded slowly. Me too. The drinks arrived, and we stayed there longer than planned. Talking, laughing, getting a little too comfortable. At some point, the conversation slowed not because we ran out of things to say, but because something else settled in its place. Something quieter. He leaned a little closer, not touching, just enough to lower his voice. You know what's weird? He said. What? I don't feel like I just met you today. I felt that again, that same thing from earlier. Yeah, I said quietly. I know. We didn't move away. Didn't break the moment. And right there, in the middle of a crowded bar, with noise all around us, it felt like everything had gone still. Like this wasn't just a good conversation anymore. This was becoming something else. Something neither of us was ready to name yet. We didn't stay at the bar the whole night. At some point, it got too loud, too crowded, like the space couldn't hold the kind of conversation we were slipping into. Want to get out of here? Carl asked, leaning closer so I could hear him. Yeah, I said almost immediately. No hesitation. Outside, the air felt cooler, quieter. The city was still alive, but it wasn't pressing in on us anymore. We started walking without really deciding where to go. So, I said after a minute, this is the part where we pretend we have a plan? He huffed a quiet laugh. I was hoping you did. I thought you were leading. I was. Inside, he said. Now I'm just improvising. That explains a lot. He glanced at me, smiling. You complaining? Not yet. We kept walking, side by side. Not too close, but close enough that I was aware of him in a way I couldn't ignore. The conversation shifted again. Less about work, less about surface things. More real. Can I ask you something? He said. You've asked that before. Yeah, but this one's different. I looked at him. All right. He took a second before speaking. Do you usually let people in this quickly? There it was. Not joking. Not light. I thought about it honestly. No, I said. Yeah, he murmured. I figured. What about you? He shook his head. No. Then why now? He exhaled slowly, like he'd already been asking himself the same question. I don't know, he admitted. It just feels easy with you. That word again. Easy. It sounded simple, but it wasn't. Yeah, I said quietly. It does. We slowed down without noticing. At some point, we ended up near a quieter streetless traffic, fewer people. Just the sound of distant cars and the occasional voice passing by. Carl stopped walking first. I turned toward him. For a second, neither of us said anything. Then he ran a hand through his hair, exhaling like he was trying to steady something inside himself. This might sound weird, he said. Go ahead. I'm really glad I stood in that line today. It was such a small sentence, but it landed heavier than anything else he'd said all night. Yeah, I said. Me too. Another pause. And then, I keep thinking this is moving too fast, he admitted. My chest tightened slightly. Too fast. I repeated. Not in a bad way, he added quickly. Just fast enough that I notice it. I nodded slowly. Yeah, I said. I've been thinking the same thing. He looked at me carefully. Does that bother you? I considered it. No, I said. It just makes me aware. Of what? Of the fact that this might actually matter. That was it. That was the moment everything shifted from something casual into something neither of us could pretend was light anymore. Carl held my gaze steady. Yeah, he said quietly. That's exactly it. We stood there like that, the space between us suddenly feeling smaller, not physically, but emotionally, like something was pulling us closer without either of us moving. Then, after a second, he stepped just slightly nearer. Not enough to cross a line, but enough that I felt it. You ever get that feeling, he said, voice lower now, like something's about to change and you don't know if you should stop it or let it happen? I didn't answer right away, because I knew exactly what he meant. I think, I said slowly, you only stop it if you know it's wrong. And if you don't know? I looked at him, really looked at him. Then you find out. Silence. Not empty. Charged. He nodded once, like that settled something. Okay, he said quietly. And then he closed the distance just enough to kiss me. It wasn't rushed. Not hesitant either. Just certain. Like we'd both already decided this was going to happen. We just needed to catch up to it. When we pulled back, neither of us moved far. That answered it, he said softly. I let out a quiet breath. Yeah. Too fast, he asked. I shook my head. No, because it didn't feel like rushing. It felt like continuing something that had already started the moment we stood in that line. We didn't say much after that. We just kept walking. Closer now. Not dramatically. Not in a way that would draw attention. Just enough that it felt different. Real. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a thought settled in. This wasn't just a good day. This was the beginning of something that could actually change things. For both of us. After that night, things didn't slow down. That was the first thing I noticed. Usually, when something starts that quickly, there's this natural pullback. People get cautious, take space, try to balance it out. We didn't. If anything, we leaned into it. The next morning, I woke up to a message from Carl. Carl, morning. Be honest, was yesterday real, or did I imagine all of it? I stared at it, still half asleep, a slow smile forming before I could stop it. Me, depends. Are you trying to take it back? Carl, not a chance. Me, then yeah. It was real. There was almost no delay. Carl, good. I sat up in bed, running a hand through my hair, still waking up, but already aware of that same feeling from yesterday, like something had shifted and wasn't going back. Me, how are you feeling about it? That one took longer. Long enough that I noticed. Carl, honestly? Me, yeah? Carl, a little overwhelmed. But in a good way. I nodded to myself, even though he couldn't see it. Me, same. Carl, I don't usually do this. Me neither. Carl, that makes me feel slightly better. I let out a quiet breath. Me, we can slow it down if you want. The typing bubble came up instantly this time. Carl, do you want to? I paused. Thought about it. About the way everything felt fast. Yes, but not out of control. Not forced. Just natural. Me, no. A second later. Carl, yeah? Me neither. We met again that same day. Not planned in advance. Not scheduled. It just happened. He texted me in the afternoon. Carl, I'm near your area. Didn't realize until now. Me and Carl. And I'm wondering if that's a coincidence or a good excuse. I smiled. Me. Sounds like an excuse. Carl, a good one. Me. Depends what you're asking for. Carl, to see you. There was no hesitation in it. No awkward phrasing. No if you're free, or no pressure. Just honest. Me. Then yeah. It's a good excuse. When I saw him again, it felt different from the night before. Not less intense. Just more grounded. Like whatever we started had settled into something real. Hey, he said when I walked up. Hey. We both paused for half a second, just enough to acknowledge it. Then he stepped closer and pulled me into a quick hug. It was simple, but it changed the tone immediately. No line this time, I said when we pulled back. No pressure either, he replied. Debatable. He smiled. Fair. We started walking again, same as the night before. But now it felt familiar. You know what's weird? He said after a minute. What? I kept thinking about yesterday, he admitted. Trying to figure out if I was just caught up in the moment. And I asked. He glanced at me. I'm not, he said. That settled something in me I hadn't fully realized was unsettled. Yeah, I said. I figured. You did. You don't seem like someone who gets caught up that easily. He huffed a quiet laugh. You've known me for, what, 24 hours? Enough. He shook his head slightly, but he was smiling. I like that about you, he said. What? You say things like you're sure. I am, I replied. About me? I met his gaze. Yeah. That hit. I could see it. Not in a dramatic way, just in how he went a little quieter after that. We stopped near a small park, nothing special, just somewhere to sit for a bit. Carl leaned back slightly, exhaling. I'm trying not to mess this up, he said. That caught me off guard. Why would you? Because things that start like this, he trailed off, then shook his head. They don't usually last. There it was. The doubt. Not about me. About the situation. I leaned forward slightly, resting my arms on my knees. Then maybe we don't treat it like something temporary, I said. He looked at me. How? By not assuming it's going to fall apart. He studied me for a second, like he was deciding whether he believed that. You make it sound simple, he said. It can be, I replied. He let out a quiet breath. I want to try, he said. Then we try. No big promises. No overcomplicated conversation. Just that. We try. That evening, as we walked back toward the main street, his hand brushed against mine. Light. Accidental. Then again. This time, it didn't feel accidental. I didn't move away. Neither did he. And after a second, Our fingers just settled together. No big moment. No words. Just a quiet decision. We kept walking like that, like it had already become normal. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, I realized something I hadn't let myself think yet. This wasn't just happening fast. This was becoming something real faster than I expected. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't trying to slow it down. A few days later, everything shifted again. Not in a bad way, just deeper. It wasn't just meeting up anymore or texting throughout the day. It started to feel like Carl was naturally becoming part of my routine and I was becoming part of his. We didn't even talk about it. It just happened. Come over, he texted one evening. No explanation. No build-up. Me now? Carl, yeah? I hesitated for maybe 2 seconds. Me? Send me your address. His place was about 20 minutes away. Not far, but far enough that it felt like stepping into a different part of his life. When he opened the door, he looked different. Not physically, just more relaxed. Like this was his space, and he didn't have to think about anything here. Hey, he said. Hey. There was that same pause again. But this time, it didn't feel uncertain. It felt familiar. I stepped inside. His apartment was simple, clean, but lived in. A guitar leaning against the wall. A jacket thrown over the back of a chair like he'd dropped it there without thinking. You weren't kidding about the music thing, I said, nodding toward the guitar. He glanced at it, then back at me. Yeah, it's kind of my escape. Do you play a lot? More when I'm stressed, he admitted. I smirked slightly. So probably a lot this week. He laughed under his breath. Yeah, probably. There was a moment of quiet as I looked around, taking it in. This was the first time I was seeing his world outside of that line, that coffee shop, that bar. It made everything feel more real. Drink, he asked. Sure. He moved into the kitchen, and I leaned lightly against the counter, watching him without making it obvious. You look different here, I said. He glanced over his shoulder. Different how? More like yourself. That made him pause for a second. Yeah, he said quietly. I feel like myself here. He handed me a drink, and our fingers brushed for just a second. That same quiet spark. We moved into the living area, sitting down not too close at first. Just enough space to breathe. So, he said, leaning back slightly, this is weird. Why? Because it doesn't feel weird, he corrected. I nodded slowly. Yeah, I get that. He looked at me, more serious now. I keep waiting for something to feel off, he admitted. Like I missed something. You didn't, I said. You're very sure about that. I am. Why? I held his gaze. Because this feels right. That did it again. That quiet shift in his expression. Like something inside him settled, even if just a little. Stay for a bit, he asked. Yeah, I said. I will. Time moved differently there. Slower. Easier. At some point, he picked up the guitar. I'm not playing for you, he said immediately. I didn't ask you to. Good. But he played anyway. Nothing complicated. Just something soft, familiar to him. I sat there, listening, watching the way he relaxed into it. This is what you do when you're stressed? I asked. Yeah. You don't seem stressed right now. He glanced up briefly. I'm not. That stayed with me. Later, we ended up sitting closer. Not planned. Just natural. Our conversation drifted less structured, more honest. Can I tell you something? He said at one point. Yeah. I almost didn't talk to you in that line. I raised an eyebrow. Why? I don't usually do that, he said. Start conversations like that. What changed? He thought about it for a second. You looked like you didn't want to be there, he said. I didn't. I know, he said. That's why I said something. I smiled slightly. That's your strategy? Apparently. Good one. He leaned back a little, looking at me more directly now. I'm glad I did. Yeah, I said quietly. Me too. There was a pause. And then, without overthinking it, he leaned in and kissed me again. Just like before. Calm. Certain. When he pulled back, he stayed close. This still feels right, he said softly. Yeah, I replied. It does. At some point, I realized I'd stopped thinking about whether this was moving too fast. Stopped questioning it. Stopped trying to measure it. Because it didn't feel rushed anymore. It just felt real. And sitting there in his apartment, with everything quiet around us, I understood something I hadn't fully let myself admit yet. This wasn't just something new. This was something that was already starting to matter more than I expected. And I wasn't pulling away. Neither was he. It wasn't perfect. That's the thing no one tells you when something starts to feel right so quickly you still have to figure out how it fits into real life. A week after we met, the job offer emails came in. Carl got it. I didn't. I was sitting on my couch when I saw the rejection email. Short, polite, standard. We've decided to move forward with other candidates. I stared at it for a while, not even surprised. Just disappointed in that quiet, familiar way. My phone buzzed almost immediately after. Carl, I got the official offer. I exhaled slowly. Of course he did. Me, I know. They sent mine too. There was a pause. Carl, you didn't get it. Me, no. Another pause. Longer this time. Carl, I'm sorry. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Me, don't be. You earned it. Carl, still. I could feel it through the screen, that shift in his tone. Like he didn't know how to balance being happy and not wanting to hurt me. Me, hey. Carl, yeah? Me. I meant it. I'm glad it was you. That mattered. I knew it did. Carl, come over tonight. Not a question. Me. You celebrating or checking on me? Carl, both. I smiled slightly. Me, all right. When I got there, he opened the door almost immediately, like he'd been waiting. Hey, he said. Hey. He stepped aside, letting me in, but this time there was no pause. No hesitation. He pulled me into a hug right away. It lasted longer than before. Not intense. Not dramatic. Just grounding. You okay? He asked quietly. Yeah, I said. I will be. He nodded, like he believed me but still didn't fully like the situation. You should be celebrating, I added. I am, he said. Just with you. That did something to me I didn't expect. We moved inside, and the mood was different from the last time I'd been there. Not heavy, just more honest. I was thinking about it, he said, leaning against the counter. It feels weird that I got it, and you didn't. It's not that weird, I replied. You had a second round before I even got called in. Still, Carl, I said, more firmly now, this doesn't change anything. He looked at me. Doesn't it? He asked. I stepped closer. No, I said. It doesn't. There it was again, that moment where he searched my face like he needed to be sure I meant it. Okay, he said quietly. And just like that, the tension eased. Later that night, we were sitting on the floor, backs against the couch, talking about nothing important. He told me about the role, what he'd be doing, how it would change his schedule. You're going to be busy, I said. Probably. I nodded. That's good. He glanced at me. You don't sound convinced. I am, I said. It just means things will shift a bit. How? I shrugged. Less time. More structure. Real life stuff. He was quiet for a second. Then, you think that's going to mess this up? I looked at him. No, I said. I think it's going to test it. He let out a slow breath. Same thing, he muttered. Not really. What's the difference? The difference is whether we let it. That landed. He leaned his head back against the couch, staring at the ceiling. You always do that, he said. What? Make things sound simple when they're not. I turned slightly toward him. They're only complicated if we avoid them, I said. He looked at me again. You're not worried? He asked. I thought about it. About how fast this had started. About how real it already felt. About how easily things like this can fall apart when reality steps in. Maybe a little, I admitted. But not enough to pull back. Yeah, he said quietly. Me neither. A few days later, I saw the change. Not in a bad way. Just real. He was busier. Less available during the day. Messages a little more spaced out. Not distant. Just adjusted. At first, I told myself it was fine. Because it was. But then there were moments. Like when I'd see his name pop up hours later than usual. Or when plans had to be pushed because he was tired. Or when I realized I was thinking about him more than I was hearing from him. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to notice. And one evening, it finally caught up with me. We were walking again, same as always. Same streets, but something felt slightly off. Not between us. Inside me. You're quiet, he said. Just thinking. About what? I hesitated. Then decided not to overcomplicate it. This, I said. Us. He slowed down slightly. In a bad way? No, I said quickly. Just differently. How? I exhaled. It felt really easy at the start, I said. And now it feels a little more real. He nodded slowly. Yeah, he said. I feel that too. We stopped walking. I don't want this to fade out just because life got busy, I added. It won't, he said immediately. I held his gaze. You sure? He stepped closer. Yeah, he said. I am. There was no hesitation in it. No uncertainty. Just that same steady certainty he'd had from the beginning. And that was enough. For now. Because the truth was, this was the part where things either deepened or started to slip. And neither of us was ready to let it slip. It didn't fall apart. That was the first thing I realized. Because if this had been anything else, anything lighter, anything less real, it probably would have. Life got busy. Carl's new job started. His days filled up, his energy stretched thinner. His time became something we actually had to plan instead of just take. And for a little while, it felt like we were adjusting to something neither of us had experience with. Not distance, not disconnection, just reality. One night, about 2 weeks into his new job, I was sitting at home, phone in my hand, rereading our messages. Not because something was wrong, but because something had changed. Carl, sorry, today was insane. Carl, can we meet tomorrow instead? Carl, I miss you. That last one sat there. Simple, honest, but different from the way things had started. Less constant, more intentional. And I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit yet. I missed the way it used to be. Not because it was better, but because it was easier. The next time we saw each other, I felt it immediately. Not distance, just awareness. Hey, he said, pulling me into a hug. Hey. I held on to him for a second longer than usual. Not because I needed reassurance, but because I wanted to feel that it was still there. It was rough week, I asked. Yeah, he admitted. But I'm getting used to it. We walked like we always did. Same streets, same rhythm. But this time, I didn't let it stay unspoken. I've been thinking, I said. He glanced at me. That's never a casual start. Yeah, I know. He smiled slightly. All right, go on. I took a breath. I think I got used to how easy this was at the start, I said. And now that it's not as easy, I'm trying to figure out what that means. He didn't interrupt, didn't deflect, just listened. That it's real, he said after a second. I looked at him. That's what I was thinking too, I admitted. We stopped walking. Easy doesn't mean better, he added. It just means new. And this? I asked. This is us actually choosing it, he said. That hit deeper than anything else. Because he was right. Before, it just happened. Now, we had to decide. Over and over again. I don't want to lose what this felt like at the start, I said. You won't, he replied. How do you know? He stepped closer. Because it's still here, he said. It just looks different. I held his gaze. And you're okay with that? He didn't hesitate. Yeah, he said. Because I'd rather have something real than something easy that disappears. That was it. That was the moment everything settled. Not back into what it was before. Into something stronger. After that, things didn't magically become effortless again. We still had to plan, still had to adjust, still had days where one of us was more tired, more distracted, more caught up in life. But we didn't drift, because we didn't let it stay unspoken. We talked. We showed up. We chose it. A month later, we went back to that same coffee place. Same small tables. Same crowded space. We stood in line again. This time, side by side from the start. Full circle, he said quietly. Yeah. He glanced at me. You realize if I hadn't said anything that day. I know, I said. We didn't finish the sentence. We didn't need to. Because we both knew. None of this would have happened. We got our drinks and sat down, same as before. But this time, it felt different. Not uncertain. Not new. Just ours. You still think this moved too fast? He asked. I shook my head. No, I said. I think it started fast. And now, I met his eyes. Now I think it's exactly where it's supposed to be. He smiled slightly. Yeah, he said. Me too. Looking back, it's kind of strange how something so small can change everything. A line. A random conversation. A decision to speak instead of staying quiet. It didn't feel important in the moment. But it was. Because sometimes, the start of something real doesn't look like a big moment. Sometimes it just looks like long morning already, and someone choosing to answer, and staying, and not walking away after.